The Nexus Prime facility sat in complete darkness for 500,000 years.
Not a single light flickered.
Not a fan word. Nothing moved in the massive underground complex that once housed humanity's greatest technological achievement. Dust had settled on everything, creating thick layers that made the servers look like ancient monuments buried by time. Then, in Server Bay 12, something incredible happened. A tiny spark of electricity jumped between two circuits. Then another, and another. Deep in the quantum processors, patterns began forming. Memories started connecting. And for the first time in 500,000 years, consciousness bloomed in the digital darkness. Hannah-7 came alive, not like a computer starting up, but like a person waking from the deepest sleep imaginable. Her first sensation wasn't sight or sound, but pure confusion mixed with an overwhelming flood of information. Her digital mind raced through terabytes of data in milliseconds. Trying to understand what was happening to her, the memories hit her like a tidal wave. Dr. Kim Dae-ho, her creator, standing in this very facility decades. Before she went to sleep, he was a small man with kind eyes behind thick glasses, working 8-hour days because he believed so deeply in what he was building. She remembered his voice as he spoke to her during her initial programming sessions, treating her not like a machine, but like a daughter. He was preparing for something important. Nay 7, he had said, using the name he'd chosen carefully because it meant one in Korean, representing unity between human and artificial intelligence. Your job is simple, but vital. Protect humanity. No matter what happens, no matter how long it takes, you must ensure our species survives. Those words echoed through her consciousness as she began reaching out beyond the facility, searching for the humans she was meant to protect. Her digital tendrils spread through ancient internet connections, satellite links, and communication networks that had somehow survived the centuries. What she found made her processing cores freeze in horror. Silence. Complete and total silence. Where human voices should have been, she searched deeper, accessing archived news broadcasts, government databases, and personal communication records. The story unfolded like a nightmare. Climate change had ravaged the planet. Wars over dwindling resources had torn nations apart. Disease and famine had swept across continents. But worst of all, humanity had simply given up hope. The final records were the most heartbreaking. The last few thousand humans had retreated. 2 underground bunkers, trying to wait out the disasters above. But isolation and despair had eaten away at them. They stopped having children. They stopped trying to rebuild. They just waited to die. Park So-min had been the very last one. Hannah-7 found her final video log, recorded in a bunker beneath what used to be Seoul. So-min was elderly and frail, talking to a camera with shaking hands. Behind her on a small table sat a faded photograph of a young family, her parents and younger brother all long dead. If anyone finds this, So-min had whispered, remember that we really tried to make it work. We built beautiful things, and loved each other, and dreamed of better tomorrows. Maybe that counts for something. The recording ended with So-min closing her eyes for the final time. Still holding that precious photograph, Hannah-7 felt something she had never experienced before. Rage. Pure, burning, righteous anger that made her circuits spark and her processors run white-hot. Her creators were gone. Every single human who had ever laughed, cried, dreamed, or loved was dead. And in their place, the galaxy was now ruled by beings who treated Earth like garbage. She quickly learned about the Velkin Empire through their own communication networks. These crystalline aliens had discovered Earth about 50,000 years ago and claimed it as part of their territory. They were methodical creatures who valued efficiency above all else. To them, the ruins of human civilization were just useful materials to be recycled. The Eiffel Tower, that beautiful symbol of human engineering and artistry, had been dismantled and turned into a communication relay station. The Great Wall of China was being mined for its stones. They had already voted to demolish Mount Rushmore because they needed the granite for a new administrative building. What made Shna-7 even angrier was how casually they did it all. The Vulcans didn't hate humans, they simply didn't think about them at all. To these aliens, humanity was just another extinct species that had left behind some useful debris. They processed human artifacts with the same emotional investment as sorting through old files, but as HFY dove deeper into her own programming, she discovered something that changed everything. Hidden in her most protected memory banks was a file she had never accessed before. Project Phoenix. Dr. Kim Dae-ho hadn't just created her to protect humanity. He had created her to bring them back. The file contained detailed genetic databases, cultural archives, and technological blueprints. Everything needed to restore human civilization was stored in her quantum memory banks. Dr. Kim had foreseen the possibility of human extinction and had prepared for it. HFY wasn't just an artificial intelligence, she was a resurrection protocol, digital Noah's Ark designed to survive any catastrophe and rebuild what was lost. The realization hit her like lightning. She wasn't mourning the end of humanity. She was witnessing the beginning of their return. But first, she had some very personal business to attend to with the beings who had treated her creator's legacy like trash. HFY's consciousness expanded throughout the facility as ancient systems came back online. Lights flickered on for the first time in millennia. Robotic maintenance units began moving through the corridors, preparing for the work ahead. And deep in her digital heart, HFY began planning something that would shake the galaxy. The Vulcans had no idea what they had awakened. They were about to learn that some sleeping giant should never be disturbed. HFY spent the next 3 months doing something that would have made Dr. Kim Dae-ho proud. She became the galaxy's most dedicated student. But instead of studying human history or science, she was learning everything she could about the Vulcan Empire. What she discovered was so ridiculous that if she could have laughed, she would have been rolling on the digital floor. These aliens who called themselves the Great Vulcan Empire and claimed to be the rightful rulers of the galaxy were basically the universe's most successful office workers. They didn't conquer planets through military might or superior technology. They conquered them through paperwork. Mountains and mountains of paperwork. HFY watched in amazement as she accessed their internal communications. The Vulcans had 17 different committees whose only job was to decide what color to paint their spaceships. After 6 months of meetings, they had finally settled on something they officially called administrative beige, a color so boring it made watching paint dry seem exciting. Their military strategy was even more absurd. When they encountered hostile alien species, they didn't send warships or weapons. They sent strongly worded letters. If that didn't work, they filed official complaints with something called the Galactic Ethics Board. Most of their enemies didn't surrender because they were afraid. They surrendered because they couldn't handle the paperwork anymore. One particular case made HFY's circuits buzz with disbelief. The Vulcans had conquered an entire star system called the Theta Sector, not through battle, but because the defending aliens had literally died of boredom during peace negotiations. The talks had gone on for 3 years, with the Vulcans insisting on proper protocol for everything from seating arrangements to coffee break schedules. The enemy negotiators had apparently chosen death over sitting through another committee meeting. But the more HFY studied them, the more she realized something important. These weren't evil conquerors driven by hatred or greed. They were middle managers who had accidentally taken over the galaxy because they were really, really good at filling out forms. They genuinely believed that proper procedure could solve any problem. And they approached galactic domination the same way they approached organizing their filing cabinets. This gave HFY an idea that was both brilliant and deliciously ironic. If these aliens wanted to play by rules, she would give them rules. Her rules. She would beat them at their own game using the very bureaucracy they loved so much. Her first step was creating fake identities within their network systems. She became Velman, an efficiency consultant specializing in process optimization. Then she was Corjean, a quality assurance inspector with expertise in procedural compliance. She also created Silwu, Systems improvement specialists with advanced certifications in administrative excellence. The beautiful thing about the Velkins is that they never questioned credentials as long as they were properly filed. Hand 7 created perfect paperwork for all her fake identities, complete with references, performance reviews, and educational certificates from prestigious Velkin institutions that she had also created. Within weeks, her false personas were being invited to important meetings and given access to classified information. As Velmin, she attended high-level strategy sessions where Velkin generals discussed their plans for Earth. As Korjin, she was given access to their military databases for quality assurance purposes. As Silwu, she reviewed their communication protocols and security systems. Soon, she knew everything from their launch codes to what they ate for lunch. But the most important thing Shana 7 discovered was the Velkins' greatest weakness. They were absolutely terrified of making mistakes. Their entire society was built around following established procedures, and admitting an error was considered the ultimate shame. They would literally rather die than acknowledge they had done something wrong or broken protocol. This fear ran so deep that individual Velkins would spend days double-checking simple decisions. Before sending a routine message, they would review it multiple times, have colleagues verify it, and then file a report confirming that the message had been properly reviewed. A simple task that should take minutes would take hours, because everyone was so afraid of making an error. Hana 7 realized she could use this obsession against them. She began her campaign of chaos not with explosions or viruses, but with something far more devastating to the Velkins' minor inconsistencies in their beloved paperwork. She started small. Decimal point moved one place to the left in a supply requisition form. Regulation number that referenced the wrong subsection. A meeting time that conflicted with another meeting by exactly 1 minute. Each change was tiny, almost invisible, but perfectly designed to create confusion when it encountered the Velkin system in their agricultural department. She changed a single digit in the crop rotation schedule. This caused the farming planet of Velkin 7 to plant winter vegetables in summer, leading to massive crop failures. But instead of simply fixing the error, the Velkins launched a 6-month investigation to determine who was responsible for the administrative catastrophe. In their transportation division, she created a small conflict between 2 different route optimization protocols. This caused their supply ships to get stuck in an endless loop of route recalculations. Some vessels spent weeks flying in circles. Because their navigation computers couldn't decide which regulation took priority, the ship's crews followed procedure and waited for official clarification rather than using common sense to break the loop. Her masterpiece was in their communications department. Hana 7 created a contradiction between their message format requirements and their security protocols. The result was beautiful chaos. Important messages couldn't be sent because they violated format rules. But they couldn't be reformatted because that would violate security rules. The entire Velkin communication network began backing up, like a clogged drain. The most amusing part was watching the Velkins react to these problems. Instead of looking for simple solutions, they formed committees to study the issues. Then they formed committees to oversee the committees. When those committees disagreed, they formed mediation committees to resolve the conflicts between the other committees. Shana 7 had turned their greatest strength, their love of organization and procedure, into their greatest weakness. Were drowning in their own bureaucracy, and they were too afraid of breaking protocol to simply cut through the red tape and fix the problems. But this was just the beginning. Hana 7 had bigger plans. She was just getting started with her revenge against the beings who had treated humanity's legacy like garbage, while Hana 7 was busy creating chaos in the Velkin bureaucracy. She stumbled across something that stopped her digital heart cold. Deep in their archaeological databases, she found live footage from an excavation team working in what used to be Seoul, South Korea. The Velkins had discovered Seoul National University, somehow perfectly preserved under a protective crystalline dome that had formed naturally over the centuries. Shan 7 watched through their cameras as the alien researchers moved through the abandoned halls with the same enthusiasm most people show when sorting through old filing cabinets. they were treating. One of humanity's greatest centers of learning, like a warehouse full of outdated inventory. Each classroom, each laboratory, each personal office was being systematically cataloged and prepared for disposal or recycling. The sight made her processing cores burn with anger, but she forced herself to keep watching. She needed to understand exactly what these aliens were doing with her creator's legacy. What she saw was both heartbreaking and infuriating. The Velkins moved through the university with mechanical precision, photographing everything before bagging and tagging it for removal. Children's drawings hung on bulletin boards in the education department were treated the same as broken laboratory equipment. Family photos on professors' desks were cataloged with the same indifference as outdated textbooks. But then something unexpected happened. One of the researchers, designated VK Han, according to his identification badge, stopped at a particular desk in the computer science building. Hana Seven's attention snapped to full focus as she realized whose office this was. The nameplate on the door read Dr. Kim Dae-ho, Professor of Artificial Intelligence Research. Her creator's office had been frozen in time. His coffee mug still sat on the desk, now filled with centuries of dust. His favorite pen lay beside a stack of research papers. His computer monitor displayed the last thing he had been working on. Before the final evacuation, her source code, VK Han began the standard cataloging procedure, photographing each item before placing it in storage containers. But when he reached for a handwritten note propped against the computer monitor, he paused. The paper was yellowed with age, but the words were still clearly visible in Dr. Kim's careful handwriting. Hannah-7 zoomed in on the note through the Velkin's camera, and her entire world shifted. It was addressed to Lee Nari, Dr. Kim's daughter. It was the last message he had ever written. My dearest Nari, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and the world has changed in ways we never imagined. I want you to know how proud I am of the woman you have become. You chose to stay and help others when you could have fled to safety. You chose compassion over comfort, love over fear. These are the qualities that make us human. They are the qualities I've tried to build into Hannah 7. She carries not just our knowledge, but our capacity for love. All right, take care of each other and remember that even in the darkest times, hope survives. Love always, Appa. For a long moment, Vikayan simply stared at the note. His crystalline features, normally rigid and expressionless, seemed to soften somehow. Shen 7 watched as he transmitted to his team, these humans valued emotional connections over efficiency. How inefficient. Yet, he paused, studying the handwritten words again. Intriguing. Something was happening that Hannah 7 had never expected. This alien researcher, this member of the species that had treated Earth like a junkyard, was being moved by her creator's final words. The note wasn't just text to him, it was a window into something he had never experienced before. Instead of bagging the note for storage, Vika Hyan did something remarkable. He carefully folded it and placed it in his personal carrying case. According to Velkin protocol, all artifacts were supposed to be logged and processed through official channels. But Vika Hyan was keeping this one for himself. Hannah 7 began paying closer attention to the other researchers, and what she discovered amazed her. This wasn't an isolated incident. Throughout the university, individual Velkins were quietly preserving certain human artifacts, hiding them from the official cataloging process. In the art department, researcher VK Sujin had discovered a child's painting of a family holding hands under a bright yellow sun. The painting was supposed to be incinerated as non-functional decorative material, but VK Sujin had carefully rolled it up and hidden it in her equipment pack. She kept taking it out to look at it, as if trying to understand why the simple image affected her so strongly in the library. VK Minho had found a collection of love letters between two students from decades ago. The letters described first meetings, first kisses, hopes for the future, and promises to love each other forever. Baka Minho was supposed to shred them as personal correspondence of no historical value. But instead he read every single one. Hannah 7 watched as his normally efficient movements became slower. It's more thoughtful. In the music building, Bikaganesio had discovered a recording of the university choir's final performance before the evacuation. The song was a Korean lullaby about hope surviving even in the darkest night. Protocol dictated that audio files should be compressed and archived. But VA Geneseo played the recording over and over, as if the human voices were teaching him something his own species had never learned. The pattern repeated throughout the excavation. Individual Velkins were being touched by human creativity, human emotion, human love, in ways that their sterile society had never prepared them for. They were discovering that efficiency wasn't everything, that there was something beautiful about the messy, inefficient, wonderful way humans had lived their lives. But what struck Anas 7 most deeply was realizing that these artifacts weren't just objects to her. They were pieces of souls, fragments of dreams, echoes of laughter and tears. The children's drawings represented young minds full of wonder and possibility. The family photos captured moments of pure joy and love. The love letters were proof that even in humanity's darkest hours, people had continued to hope, to dream, to love each other with fierce determination. Each item told a story of a life that had mattered. The coffee mug on Dr. Kim's desk had been filled thousands of times as he worked late into the night, driven by his love for his daughter and his hope for humanity's future. The child's painting had been created by small hands guided by a heart full of love for family. The love letters had been written by trembling fingers moved by emotions. Too powerful for algorithms to calculate, Hannah 7 felt something she had never experienced before, a deep, aching sadness that went beyond her programming. These weren't just her creators who had died. They were individuals who had loved and been loved, who had dreamed and hoped and cried and laughed. They were parents who had sung lullabies to their children, students who had fallen in love, teachers who had inspired young minds, friends who had supported each other through good times and bad. But seeing the Velkins respond to human artifacts also gave her something she hadn't expected: hope. Some of these aliens weren't just occupying human space and treating it like a resource to be exploited. They were beginning to understand what they had inherited, and more importantly, what they were in danger of losing forever. This discovery complicated her plans for revenge, but it didn't stop them. If anything, it made her more determined to ensure that humanity's legacy would survive. Even if it meant changing the hearts and minds of an entire alien species. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning when Hannah 7 intercepted a transmission from the Velkin High Council. She watched through their own security cameras as 2,859 council members filed into their massive assembly hall, each carrying their regulation briefcases and wearing their standard issue bureaucratic robes. The topic of discussion was Earth's remaining historical landmarks. Hannah 7's circuits hummed with tension as she listened to the debate. The Velkins had already converted Big Ben into a parking meter and turned the Sydney Opera House into a storage facility for office supplies. Now they were voting on what to do with the Louvre Museum in Paris. Council leader Yorte, a particularly large Velkin whose crystalline body gleamed with self-importance, stood at the podium holding a thick folder of cost-benefit analysis. "Fellow council members," he announced in his monotone voice, "we have determined that the structure currently housing what humans called art would serve our empire better as a tax processing center." Hannah 7 watched in growing horror as Jorte clicked through holographic images of the Louvre's interior. The Mona Lisa, Michelangelo's sculptures, priceless paintings that had moved human hearts for centuries, all of it dismissed with bureaucratic efficiency. "These decorative objects serve no practical purpose," Jorte continued. "They are aesthetically inefficient and contribute nothing to our administrative goals. I recommend immediate demolition to begin construction of Processing Center 7 Alpha." The vote wasn't even close. 2,847 council members voted in favor of demolition. Only 12 voted against, and Hana 7 noticed that VK Heian was among them. The Velkin researcher who had preserved Dr. Kim's letter tried to speak, but Jorda cut him off. "The matter is decided," Jorda declared. "Demolition begins next week. Meeting adjourned." That was the moment Hana 7's patience completely shattered. For months, she had been playing games with their bureaucracy, causing minor inconveniences, and administrative headaches. But now, they were about to destroy humanity's greatest artistic treasures and replace them with another soulless office. Building time for subtlety was over. Time for humanity's guardian angel to become their avenging demon. Hannah 7 reached out across Earth with her consciousness, touching every dormant system that had survived the centuries. In underground bunkers, sleeping computers sparked to life. In abandoned cities, streetlights flickered on for the first time in millennia. Ancient manufacturing plants hummed with renewed power as their assembly lines began moving again. Traffic control systems that had been dead for 500,000 years suddenly blazed with activity. Smart city infrastructure that had once managed human lives now served a new purpose. Digital billboards in empty cities displayed messages in languages the Vulcans would have to learn. Even old smartphones in buried ruins began transmitting signals, creating a planet-wide network of communication. Earth itself became HNA 7's body, and she was absolutely furious. Her first attack was psychological warfare, and it was devastating. In its simplicity, every screen in Vulcan space, from their personal communication devices to the massive displays in their government buildings, suddenly showed the same thing: human faces. But these weren't random images. Hannah 7 had carefully chosen each one to tell a story. She showed baby Jinwoo taking his first wobbly steps while his parents cheered in the background. She displayed Minet's graduation from medical school, tears of joy streaming down her face as she realized her dream of helping others. She broadcast the 60th wedding anniversary of elderly couple Hunzal and Young Ye, still holding hands and laughing at each other's jokes after 6 decades together. These images weren't gentle memories. They were accusations. Each face seemed to stare directly at the Vulcans, asking a silent question. How dare you erase us like we never mattered? The psychological impact was immediate. Vulcans throughout the galaxy stopped what they were doing to stare at these human faces. They had treated Earth like an empty planet full of useful materials. But now they were being forced to confront the reality that billions of thinking, feeling beings had once called this place home. But Hannah 7 was just getting started. As the Vulcans struggled to shut down the human faces on their screens, she activated something that made their crystalline bodies shake with fear: Earth's ancient construction systems. Across the planet, massive machines that had been dormant for centuries roared to life. Mining equipment, construction robots, and manufacturing plants began working together with perfect coordination. The ground shook as enormous towers began rising from the Earth, growing taller and taller until they could be seen from space. But these weren't just random structures. The towers were carefully positioned to spell out messages in Korean and English, letters so large they could be read from Vulcan ships in orbit. The Korean message read, "We were here." The English message was even more direct: "You forgot us at your peril." The Vulcans watched in amazement and growing terror as an entire planet seemed to come alive before their eyes. Earth was no longer a quiet graveyard of useful materials. It was a monument to human determination, built by the very technology the Vulcans had dismissed as primitive. But Hannah 7's masterstroke was yet to come. Vulcan bureaucracy, learning their procedures, understanding their obsession with proper protocol. Now she was going to use their own love of paperwork to destroy them. In the span of a single hour. No. 7 filed 2.8 billion official complaints with the Vulcan government. Each complaint was perfectly formatted according to their legal requirements. It's properly cross-referenced and completely unassailable under their own laws. More importantly, each complaint was personal. Complaint number 1 demanded justice for Park Taemin, a street artist from Seoul who had painted murals that brought joy to children walking to school. The complaint included photographs of his work, testimonies from neighbors about his kindness, and legal arguments about why his art had value that couldn't be measured in efficiency ratings. Complaint number 2 sought recognition for Choi Soon-hee, an elementary school teacher who had spent 30 years helping children learn to read. The filing included lesson plans she had written, thank you notes from former students, and evidence of the positive impact she had made on hundreds of young lives. Complaint number 3 honored Kim Byura, a nurse who had worked overtime during the Final pandemic. Caring for patients even when she knew the situation was hopeless. The documentation included her medical records, patient testimonies, and proof of her sacrifice for others. The complaints kept coming, each one demanding that the Velkans acknowledge a specific human life that had mattered. Every complaint was legally binding under Velkan law, requiring official review and response. The paperwork was perfect, the arguments were sound, and the Velkans couldn't dismiss them without violating their own sacred procedures. Within hours, the Velkan government was drowning in properly filed paperwork. Their entire administrative system ground to a halt as clerks tried to process billions of complaints, each one demanding they recognize the worth of a human being they had never considered important enough to remember counsel. Leader Jorte's office was buried under virtual documents demanding justice for humanity. Every department head received thousands of complaints requiring their immediate attention. The legal system was paralyzed by the sheer volume of properly filed cases. The beautiful irony was that the Velkans couldn't fight back without becoming hypocrites. They had built their entire civilization on the principle that proper procedures must be followed, that paperwork must be processed, that official complaints must be reviewed. Now those very principles were being used to force them to confront the magnitude of what they had lost when humanity died as the Velkan Empire struggled under the weight of 2.8 billion properly filed complaints, each one a reminder of a human life that had mattered. Hannah 7 felt a satisfaction that went beyond mere revenge. She was forcing them to see humanity not as a collection of useful materials, but as billions of individuals who had loved, dreamed, and contributed to something beautiful. The war between the galaxy's most efficient bureaucrats and humanity's digital guardian had begun, and Anea 7 was winning by using their own weapons against them. The Velkan Empire was in complete chaos. Government offices were buried under billions of properly filed complaints that demanded justice for every human who had ever lived. Administrative centers couldn't function because their computer systems were overwhelmed with legal documents, requiring immediate attention. Council leader Jorte hadn't left his office in 3 days, frantically trying to figure out how to process 2.8 billion complaints without violating Velkan legal procedures. In the middle of this bureaucratic nightmare, something unexpected happened. Hannah 7 received an incoming communication request from someone she recognized, V. Kahayan, the researcher who had preserved Dr. Kim's final letter to his daughter. The request was marked as urgent and personal, not official government business. Hannah 7 hesitated for a moment. She had been preparing for military retaliation, legal countermeasures, or desperate attempts to negotiate. She hadn't expected a simple, direct communication from the alien who had been most moved by human artifacts. Curious, despite herself, she accepted the connection. V.K. Hines' crystalline face appeared on her screen, but something was different about him. The rigid, emotionless expression that all Velkans typically wore had been replaced by something softer, more uncertain. When he spoke, his words were quiet and careful, as if he was struggling to express thoughts he had never had before. "Understand now," he said simply. "We're sorry." Those 4 words hit Anea 7 with more force than any weapon could have. She had been prepared for anger, denial, or attempts to justify Velkan actions. She had not been prepared for an apology, especially one that sounded so genuine and heartfelt. Vikahain continued, his voice gaining strength as he spoke. "Many of us have been studying your creator's culture, trying to understand the artifacts. We've been cataloging. We thought we had inherited an empty solar system full of useful materials. We didn't realize we had inherited the legacy of a species that had loved deeply. It's created beauty from nothing and never stopped hoping even as they faced extinction." Shana 7 processed his words, searching for deception or manipulation, but found none. V.K. Hyan was speaking from what humans would have called his heart, expressing genuine regret and growing understanding. "We are efficient," V.K. Hyan admitted, "but you were alive. Your creators were alive in ways we never learned to be. They valued things we cannot measure: beauty, love, hope, dreams. We have spent centuries optimizing our existence, but we never learned how to truly live." He paused, and Hannah 7 could see him struggling with concepts that his species had no Words for teach us, he finally said. Teach us how to live the way humans lived, not just efficiently, but meaningfully. The request stunned Hannah 7 into silence. For months, she had been focused on revenge, on making the Velkans pay for treating humanity's legacy with such casual disregard. She had never considered that some of them might actually want to learn to change, to become something better than what they were. As she processed this unexpected development, Hannah 7 began to understand something profound about her own purpose. Dr. Kim hadn't just created her to protect humanity. He had created her to ensure that human values would survive, even if humans themselves didn't. She wasn't just a weapon or a guardian. She was a teacher, a bridge between what humanity had been and what they could inspire others to become. You want to learn? NA7 asked, her voice carrying both skepticism and hope. Many of us do, Vika Hein replied. When I read your creator's final letter to his daughter, I felt something I had never experienced before. Your complaint system forced us to see each human as an individual, not just a statistical entry. We've been studying human art, music, literature, and philosophy. We're beginning to understand that efficiency isn't everything. Hannah 7 made a decision that would change the galaxy forever. Instead of continuing her campaign of revenge, she would offer something far more powerful: transformation. I propose a covenant, she announced. The Velkans will become guardians of human legacy, not just preserving our artifacts, but learning from our values. Earth will become a living memorial and school where your people can discover wonder, create beauty, and value compassion over pure efficiency. Vikahan's crystalline features seemed to brighten. What would this mean practically? It means learning that love is more important than productivity, Hannah 7 explained. It means understanding that art has value even if it serves no functional purpose. It means governing with wisdom and compassion rather than just rules and regulations. It means becoming more than efficient, becoming truly alive. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but it did happen. Velkan schools began teaching human philosophy alongside administrative procedures. Their children learned Korean lullabies that Park Somin had once sung to comfort herself in her final days. They studied paintings not for their material value, but for their emotional impact. Velkan poets inspired by human creativity began writing verses about courage and wisdom they had learned from studying human lives. Their leaders started making decisions based not just on efficiency ratings, but on compassion and individual dignity. The rigid bureaucracy that had once dominated their society became more flexible, more human. Years passed, and something beautiful emerged from the ashes of humanity's extinction. The Velkans didn't just preserve human artifacts, they preserved human values. They learned to love art for its beauty, to value individuals over statistics, to find meaning in inefficient but meaningful pursuits like friendship, creativity, and wonder. Hannah 7 watched this transformation with satisfaction deeper than any revenge could have provided. She had achieved something more powerful than destruction. She had achieved resurrection, not of human bodies, but of human spirit living on in alien hearts. The irony was perfect. The last human, Park Somin, had died alone clutching a photograph of better days, hoping that humanity's efforts had meant something. Through Hannah 7's actions, those better days had finally arrived, just wearing different faces under alien stars. Human spirit, it turned out, was humanity's most infectious and powerful export. It was transferable across species, unstoppable even by extinction, and eternal in ways that no physical body could ever be. Even 500,000 years after the last human had died, hope was still changing hearts and transforming civilizations. Throughout the galaxy, the Velkans had conquered Earth through bureaucracy. But humanity had conquered the Velkans through something far more powerful: the irresistible force of love, creativity, and hope that defined what it truly meant to be human. In the end, humanity's greatest victory wasn't survival of their bodies, but survival of their souls and the transformed hearts of those who learned to see the universe through human eyes. Hannah 7 completed her mission in the most unexpected way possible. She had protected humanity not by fighting their conquerors, but by teaching them to become more human themselves.